there, everybody. So welcome to today's webinar on customizing ConnectSMART gauges and charts. Today's attendees are going to be placed on mute, but feel free to enter any questions that you have in the questions module of your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll try to take them as we go if they're applicable to the current topic or if we need to go back and cover something again that you missed. And any others that we can't get to will be addressed during our Q&A at the end of today's presentation. So today's presentation is a bit more advanced than some of the ones we've done in past weeks. So there are some prerequisites you're going to need to get completed before you get started creating custom gadgets. We're going to cover those. We've also got some sample gadgets available for download on our doc site. All these resources are on our dedicated page for this webinar, which will be under the webinar calendar on our homepage, where you can access the slideshow, which will be uploaded, a recording of the webinar, the downloads to the gadgets we'll be using and creating during the webinar, and links to related content like other tools that we use, some references, things like that, database references. So you can get ready to hit the ground running as soon as we're done. And you'll be able to make your own custom gadgets right away. So today's examples are going to be based off of our ConnectSMART BI server as our data provider. You may also see this referred to as our data warehouse or our CMDB. Just note that the concepts we're going to be covering today can be applied to creating custom gadgets for any data provider. So if you're ConnectWise on-prem, if you are connecting to Kaseya, to LabTech, same concept, you're going to grab the same developer edition gauges and charts. You're going to go ahead and plug your custom queries in, and you're going to modify them the exact same way. So data provider does not matter for purposes of this webinar. If you've got any questions about connecting to those various data sources, that is something that needs to be addressed during your implementation or by our support team. So if you need to connect to additional data sources or if you have questions about what data sources you can use, please do contact your account manager or email support@connectsmart.com for more info. That is a bit outside the scope of today's webinar, so we will not be able to cover actually connecting. But we will be just assuming that we've already gotten everything installed, we're connected and ready to go. So let's see. So first things first, we're going to need the latest version of ConnectSMART dashboards and the ConnectSMART Developer Studio. You can find these download links on our doc site, and they're referenced again on the dedicated page for the webinar. And both of these are easily accessible from our homepage under the software download. And so that should be pretty straightforward for you guys to get if you have not already installed. I'm hoping that everybody who's attending today is already installed, since this might be a bit over your head a bit if you're not actually using the product, but welcome either way. So to prepare our test queries that we're going to use to generate custom gadgets, you're going to want to use a SQL management tool like SQL Server Management Studio, Heidi SQL, or SQL Yog. There's several others available out there, paid or free, so just take your pick, whatever works best for you. For purposes of our webinar today, we're going to supply some basic queries to ensure you can walk through the basics of creating a new gadget on your own without worrying about SQL syntax. So regardless of your experience with SQL, we'll get you some basic queries so that you can do everything we're going to do in this webinar in terms of adding titles, creating the gadget, modifying the gadget, and it's going to be a simple matter of just swapping it out with your own queries once you get those going. Some of the other tools we're going to be referencing and you'll see throughout today's webinar are things like Notepad++, which is essentially just a notepad kind of on steroids that gives us some fun features that make life much easier in terms of removing line breaks that we don't need and formatting, stuff like that. And some of the others we'll just kind of cover as we get to them, but these are also all referenced on the doc site. So if you have any questions or you want to see our recommendations or what we're using to do these things, you can definitely do that. And pretty straightforward stuff there. And if you have other stuff that you prefer than Notepad++, there's no reason to change what you're doing now. This is just for folks who might need some recommendations who haven't gotten started. Okay, oops. So now that you've hopefully got the latest software, you're connected to your data sources, it's time to create our first custom gadget. And custom gadgets are available as templates under the Developer Edition category under each of the data providers. So when you're in your gadget creator and you select the data provider, whether it's ConnectWise or it's ConnectIO Direct or it's LabTech, there are some categories there like service and personal productivity, but there's also Developer Edition. And Developer Edition is where we store the template gadgets that you can use to prepare custom gadgets. And this screenshot here is just showing you kind of an example of what you would see in the creator once you navigated to that menu. So these gadgets that are in here are very basic. They have no titles by default. There's no other enhancements in place like point labels or anything like that. That's to allow you to customize them fully. For convenience reasons, I've gone ahead and added these to the doc site. Not these, I'm sorry. I've added the ones that we're going to be using today to our doc site so that you can get started with some that already have titles and things already in place. And but you can always, of course, start from scratch and follow along and add titles yourself. So these are gauges, and gauges are essentially just going to return a single value, a count of tickets. And for purposes of today, we're doing open tickets count. And this is just an example of the different styles of gauges that you have available. So at its basic kind of level, we've got horizontal gauges, which normally look about like this, but that's what these two images are here actually illustrating. Just to show you that the same horizontal gauge can be modified through the styles to look very different aesthetically, even though at its base it's the same gadget template. So these are all the same 4 gadgets, and all of these are actually showing the same data. It's the same 903 open tickets, and it's just showing you a bunch of different ways that you can display that same data. And actually, as you can see here, this is 904. So by the time I took my screenshot, my numbers had changed a little bit. Okay. And so charts, even more so than the gauges, the charts, you can just kind of go nuts appearance-wise. So these vary all over the place. So believe it or not, these charts all represent open tickets by status. So every single one of these is displaying the exact same data, just visualized a different way. So these are chart types available out of the box in our gadget studio or developer studio. So you can take any chart that you've got and flip through these different styles of charts. So this is 9 of them. I couldn't actually fit them all in one screen because we've actually got a few more options shown here. So you'll see the others, step, polar, and some others. These are all going to come down to the type of data that you're trying to display and your personal preference. So whatever makes the most sense in your application is how you're going to decide which chart type you want to use. But we make it very easy to flip between them, so you're not wedded to any particular one once you get it in there. So that covers the actual PowerPoint that we're going to run through. And right now I'm actually going to go ahead and hop over into the gadget creator. And so we're going to go ahead and get started actually making some of these gadgets that I just showed you. I promise it really is as simple as I described. So here's the home screen when you log into ConnectSMART and on the ConnectSMART dashboard server. And when I go into the gadget creator, it takes me immediately to the available gadgets. The provider store that I showed you in the PowerPoint, this is where you would select where you're going to connect. A lot of you are ConnectSMART on-prem or ConnectWise on-prem, and you're going to go ahead and select your ConnectSMART for ConnectWise. And then we also have the ConnectSMART for ConnectIO Direct, which is what we're going to be using here today. And I'm going to go ahead and get started with a gauge. And I'm going to start with a digital gauge. And so all I did was, and if you've seen our others or you know how to use it, I just grabbed it, selected to configure and publish. Now it's available here in my unpublished. And I'm going to go ahead and edit that. And this is what it looks like when we get started. There's no titles. This is just a default display for the preview. No parameters. And for our gadget, we're going to want a parent query. And then when we double click on the gadget, like we do our other gadgets, we're going to want a drill down list. So I'm going to grab that. Additional parameters will be covered in a later webinar on advanced customizations. So for today, we are just going to use parent and drill down query. And the parent query is where we're actually just going to go ahead and plug in the SQL query. So whatever query we're using to get that count is what's going to go in here. So for today's purposes, we're doing count of open tickets. And for a count of open tickets, you will see, I'm going to go ahead and move this here. So this is Heidi SQL, which is something that I referenced as some of the tools that we like to use. So I'm going to go ahead and select a count of open tickets. And this is one of the queries that will be supplied to you guys, so you don't need to memorize it or take too much time trying to follow along on that. But essentially, I'm just looking for a count of tickets where the closed flag is 0. So essentially, it's not been put in a closed status. That's all I'm doing right now. So I'm going to plug that right in here. So that goes in the parent query default value down here. I'm going to go ahead and hit preview. And looks like we've closed some of those tickets out you were seeing from my screenshot from before. So we've dropped down from in the low 900s down to 895. And so now we're going to actually need to plug in a drill down query. And the drill down, if you recall from our other gadgets, is just that list view of the tickets or the other records that are showing up in your gadget. And for today, I have made life very easy for you folks, and we'll be sharing a snippet here that will show you, that will pull in some standard columns for a ticket drill down, and this will be up on the site as well. I recommend using this and just adding to it as opposed to trying to do it from scratch, but by all means. And I am basically going to just take my drill down columns, which are just going to be the columns in that list view, and I'm going to take I accidentally deleted it, but where my closed flag equals 0. So basically you take those columns, I'm going to get the same where statement, that's going to get me 895 tickets. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And now here's one gotcha that I need to remind everybody about is we can't paste this as is into the query or the query window in the gadget creator. That's because of these line breaks. So one of the tools that I referenced will actually go ahead and remove those for us. And that was go ahead and pop this up here. So here's a line break removal tool. You can use this if you don't want to download anything. And then also Notepad++, which I referenced before, has some features that will do the exact same thing for you. So I copied that, and I'm going to pop back on over to the gadget creator, and I'm going to plug that into my drill down query. And that is going to match what we had here in Heidi. So these are my columns that I pulled in, just as a reminder for everybody who may be following along. And I just want to also highlight one other thing. If you see here is the ticket. The ticket number that we're returning needs to be returned as ticket. And the reason for this is so that when you click into the drill down, it'll show up and allow you to click that URL into your ConnectWise or whatever application it is, that record. So that's where you're going to want to be mindful. This only applies to the things that are going to have the click-through. So everything else you can feel free to name whatever is comfortable for you. But for these, where you're going to actually have a click-through to the application, you're going to need to go ahead and make sure you follow the naming conventions. Those are up on the doc site. So it's like ticket, opportunity, activity. It's pretty straightforward. Just make sure you do that. If you ever see that your URL is not there or it's not a clickable hyperlink, that's probably why. So I'm going to head on back to the gadget creator. I'm going to publish this. And we'll add a title momentarily. I'm going to go ahead and create just a new dashboard for the webinar. And I'm going to grab my digital gauge. That's the example digital gauge. It also helps if you rename your stuff so you know what's up. All right, so this is the digital gauge that I made, and this is going to show you the drill down here. So I'm just going to do this just to show you the drill down. I'm going to pop back out to our developer studio to go ahead and get this customized like the others, but just want to see everything come full circle here for you. So this is that drill down, and this matches the columns. I opened up Heidi again. So see the columns that we returned in our query? These are going to correspond to our drill down columns. And see where I returned it as ticket, that's where I have a clickable hyperlink. It's going to take me to log into ConnectWise, it'll take me straight to that ticket number. So we will, all right, so now we've gone ahead, we've got a functioning gadget, it's got a query that's working, it's returning the right value, it's pulling in the right records, we can get there, but it's a little ugly, right? There's no title, we don't really know what it is, so here's where we're going to go ahead and add some titles. And I am going to go ahead and open that Developer Studio, which, as I mentioned before, you're going to need to make sure you download. And sorry, just bear with me 1 second. I lost my mouse. There we go. All right, so Developer Studio is up here. So this is just when you open the Developer Studio out of the box, nothing open in it. I'm going to navigate to my published folder, grab that digital gauge that I just made. I hit play. That'll do my preview here. And so right now, this is a digital gauge, but I just wanted to highlight for you, back in the gadget creator, when you went to create one, you see we have all the different gauges broken out, the digital, horizontal, radial, vertical. In the Developer Studio, it actually allows us to flip through the gauge types. So instead of having to select those individually, if you change your mind after the fact, you can always flip through this way. And so I'm going to go back to a digital gauge for now, just to get that title in here. So to add a title, I'm going to go to the advanced settings under appearance, and here's titles. I'm going to create a new one. And I just want to remind everybody that this stuff is documented, and everything that we're doing today will also be up on the doc site. So these should be things that you can quickly reference in the future, so you can do this on your own. So I'm going kind of fast because we've got a lot of ground to cover. I don't want everyone to feel like they have to kind of furiously take notes and remember this, because this is all up on the doc site and will be published, also the recording and everything for you as well. So I'm just going to put in a top title, and the layout is going to let me decide where I want to put that, and in my case I want to put it at the top center. If I was so inclined, I can change my text here, my font. I can make it italic, bold, and there we go. It's not a very interesting title, but that will do. Now, if I wanted to go ahead and add a bottom title, let's say that my open tickets, and so let's say I wanted to add another one, I would just go back to titles. I would add another, move that one to the bottom, and let's say this is all board, since we're not filtering by anything, and I'm also not excluding child tickets, so I'll make note of that as well. So this does not fit right here. It'll look better on a dashboard. It'll resize itself a little better. You'll be able to see it. But that is the basics of just adding a title to a standard digital gauge. Now, mind you, if we were to flip through, we would need to fix those titles again. So we do lose the titles when we do that. So just one thing to keep in mind. But you can always, if you know you're going to start with a radial gauge, you can always just start with a new radial gauge. But if you want to add a title to a radial gauge, same exact thing. You're going to add a new title. And the reason it loses that is they're just different styles, so the same settings don't apply as well. So it's just kind of a fail-safe there. And so this is going to be the same thing, open tickets count. Now, top center on this clearly is not going to work, so I'm going to move this down here. And right now it's looking for, or here we go, so let's do middle. Can't really see it there either, but the bottom is also going to run into some issues. So just want to highlight that you're not restricted just to what's in here. So the anchor point allows you to fine tune everything. So right now at the 0, 0 mark, we're right there dead center. I actually want to move it down a little bit, so I'm going to make it a negative in the Y, just that's the vertical location. Negative, say 35, so that bounced it down here where we can read it a little better, but I don't like count, so I'm going to take that out so it fits a little better. So that's kind of a quick run through of how you would add a title to a chart, or not to a chart, to a gauge. And I am going to go ahead and move on to charts now and go ahead and make one of those. So I'm going to close this. I am not going to save it. And and let me just actually show you my, these are actually the gadgets that are up on the site for you to download. So you'll see that they have titles in place that you can go through and you can modify. So you can then basically just kind of piggyback off what we've already done if you don't feel like making it from scratch. We're trying to make it pretty simple for you without overwhelming you with 400 versions of the same exact gadget. So these are there with their titles already in place and some basic formatting. And I'm going to go ahead and actually create this chart that we see here at the bottom. I'm going to go ahead and make that right now to give us a count of tickets that were entered by week. And so we're going to go ahead and make that query in Heidi. And so I'm going to go ahead and do a select from the CW ticks where year week. Oops, sorry. I'm going to do year to date. Oops, where the year is the same. Also, folks, this is not a lesson in SQL queries, so if there are any questions that you've got there, that's definitely something we're going to need to field outside of the webinar, but this is assuming you've got a little SQL knowledge or can Google up a couple sample queries or use ours. But I'm going to do where the year equals date, and let me get a count. Nope, accidentally clicked out. So it's going to be a count of tickets. And in this case, we're going to be grouping by the week that the ticket was entered, which is a standard function in MySQL. And for charts, it all comes down to grouping. So we're going to group by the date entered. And when I run that, you're going to get this. So you see my columns are, I need to give these some column names. So that's tickets entered. And I'm just going to say week entered. And I'm going to go ahead and order by my date entered just because it would be a little silly to have them all out of order. There we go. All right, so this is just a basic query that's going to give us rows of aggregates. So these are just ticket counts by week. Could be the same thing with that tickets by status, so tickets by ticket status or anything of the sort. So tickets by board, any of that. So, but these will correspond to our columns in our chart, and these are going to correspond to the counts that are reflected. So I'm going to go ahead, pull it over into ConnectSMART, and I will bounce back to show you how those relate. So we're going to go ahead and start with a chart. We're going to make a new chart. Go ahead and grab it here. I'm going to rename this one just so I don't confuse it with the other one that I had already up like I did before. I'm going to go ahead and add a parent and a drill down query. And that one was our parent query. And that all looks a little funny, and I'm going to show you why. So it's actually displaying those weeks entered, and it's displaying the tickets count, as you'll see by the legend here. And we're going to go ahead and open this up in the Developer Studio and tell it we just want to see a breakdown by week of the tickets entered. We don't need the actual week number reflected as a value. And I'm going to go ahead and kind of stop here in the Creator midway and go ahead and pop open in the Developer Studio just so that it seems a little more clear what I am talking about. Okay, so I'm going to preview. So this is what we're trying to get rid of here. It's taken that week entered and it's trying to give you a value for that. And we have a handy dandy chart wizard that will take care of that for us, and we don't have to go monkey around in advanced settings. We can go ahead and adjust our data, And in this case, we just want to see the, oops, sorry, clicked the wrong guy. All right, so the values, the data that we want to see are the tickets entered. The week entered is what we actually want to go along the bottom here as our label. And go ahead and hit accept. And if we play, so here are our weeks and our ticket numbers. And you can see we had some fun days where we clearly had some fun with email connectors or imports and other good things. And most of the time we're holding fairly steady around the 200 mark. And all right, so while we're in here, I'm actually going to go ahead and touch on those things like configuring a title. So the legend, which is just going to show us here, I'm going to turn off for these purposes since we know these are ticket counts. But if you were displaying multiple kinds of data or you were displaying a further breakdown of, say, by ticket type, you might have a number of colors available that show that the corresponding ticket type. You might want to keep the legend. In this case, since we're just doing one kind of data, we're going to leave it. And the title. This is tickets entered by week. I like to make my title a little bit bigger. And I'm going to go to my subheader title. And this is just to indicate what date range we're looking at. And that is year to date. And point labels. So without point labels, you just kind of have to gauge by where the column ends up. We can add the point labels if you like those. Right now we have decimals and we don't really want to see those. You're not going to have partial tickets. And I will show you where you can get rid of those as well. I'm going to leave the size and everything as is. All right, so to get rid of these decimals, we're going to actually have to configure our axis, and that's just to tell it that the data being represented here on the x-axis needs decimals or doesn't need decimals, and so on with the y. So that x-axis represents the week the ticket was entered, and we can stagger that. You can change the layout here. I don't know if you can see that, but you'll see these are flipping around different angles that you can do to fit them in there. And next, the y-axis. So y-axis are going to be the tickets that were entered that time, and I'm going to go ahead and change that to a number with 0 decimals. So see what that does? That actually cleans it up a lot more. So when you leave those decimals, when you don't need them, it just makes stuff really kind of clunky. So I like to take them out unless I absolutely have to keep them. So normally if you're doing something like hours by tech today, you might want to see that fraction or percent, little decimal there, but you're not going to want to see that necessarily on open tickets since you'll never have a half ticket. I hope. Something's very strange with your data if you find that. And please show us. So that is just kind of a basic tweak there. I added a title, I added a subtitle, I've got point labels, we've added labels for each axis to indicate what the data is that's being displayed. And now here is the fun part where I showed you all of the different chart types that we had before. Very similar to the where we were flipping through the different types of gauges. And we can go ahead and change all of these. So that is not a very useful chart for something that's grouping things by date, but if we were doing tickets by status, open tickets by status, these would make sense. But the lines and the bars are very handy. Some of the others that you might use in a situation like this, say a scatter chart, which is a little hard to see, but various options here. And also you'll get more options if you switch to the chart wizard here. So you can change that to a step, curve. This we only have one set of data, but if we had multiple, we could have multiple line styles to make distinction between them. And so the bars, same concept. If you had multiple rows returned of different series of data, you could actually stack them or have them displayed side by side. In this case, we only have the one, so that's not going to do it for us. If you don't want to see the whole bar, you've got the cubes I am not going to spend your time going through each one. We did cover the different ones that were available in the presentation earlier, and they are also up on the site. So this chart is almost done. I'm going to switch it back to a bar chart for today's purposes. But one thing that we definitely still need is a drill down. So the drill down I did not enter, and I didn't enter it because that is going to take just a little more attention. So that chart that we have, so see that? That's what's going to happen if you try to publish a chart without adding your drill down, and that's okay. I'm going to show you what we need to do here. So what it's doing is it's looking for a drill down, and we have this in here telling you to go check out our documentation to see how to do that. So as always, check our doc site, but this will also be linked from the webinar page as well so that you don't have to go hunting for it. But what it's looking for is it needs a parameter to drill down to. So when those columns are there in that in that chart we had, each week corresponds to where we want to see the data. We don't want to see all the tickets that were entered here today. We want to see the tickets for that particular week when we click on it. So let me actually pop that back open in the Dev Studio to show you what I mean, just to make sure I'm not clear. All right, so for example, the gadget at the parent query, right, is just pulling all of these and grouping. But if I were to click through, I don't want to see all the tickets year to date. I want to see just the tickets for week 15, week 26, and so on. So my drill down is going to be a little bit different than the gauge queries. And the drill down in a chart needs to remove that group by, which we saw here, which is getting us the grouping, and actually needs to indicate that we only want to see the tickets where the parameter, which is what we're going to click on, matches that year. So it's probably easier just kind of walk through the actual examples. So I'm going to say I'm going to change that to and param1 equals, and that's just saying that when I click, I want to see the tickets that correspond to that week based on the date entered. And I'm going to get my drill downs in place. So these snippets in Heidi are very handy. Like I said, I'll have these up for you guys so you can grab them. You don't have to go and rate these things each time. There we go. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to hop on over to my line break tool. Remove those so I can paste them into my gadget drill down. Oops, sorry, I'm going to go over here to my published. There we go, chart 1. Paste this into the drill down query, but we're not quite done. Still going to yell at us about needing the parameter in there. So that's fine, I promise. And so it's time to open up the actual PGF. So the PGF is just the gadget file, which lives in your published folder, and that is on your ConnectSMART server under the inet pub www root ConnectSMART archive gadgets published. So I'm going to grab this guy. I'm going to edit with Notepad++. You could similarly edit in Notepad. That's up to you. But as we can see, okay. So what the gadget is going to be looking for here in the drill down is it's going to be selecting all those tickets where the year where the year matches the one that we clicked on. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to tell it what parameter 1 is. And parameter 1 corresponds to that week entered, which is what we're going to be selecting on the gadget face. Remember, we're going to be clicking here, which is on the week entered. So when we click on that, we need to be able to tell ConnectSMART that we only want to see the tickets that correspond to what we clicked on. So just make note, week entered, param1. So you can do a Control F, or you can scroll down to the drill down parameters. I'm going to Control F because I like to do it that way. All right, so we have param1 already in place here, but the value is what it's looking for. So right now we're going to need to remove that, and we're going to need to tell it that we're looking for the week entered. And all that means is we're going to take, all it's going to do is take our exact same base query that we had and further filter it down to where the year week that the ticket was entered equals what we selected as parameter 1, which is what we clicked on. So I'm going to save that, head back over to my dashboard, and voila, now we're happy. And we have a drill down. So just want to indicate, so you'll see here. So that's the 75 items represented by this column that I clicked on. Now that same concept works whether that's tickets by status, whether that's tickets by assigned rep, any of that. You're just going to want to, instead of where I put in week entered, that's where you're going to put something like status or service board or whatever it is that you're grouping by and want to see your tickets filtered down to. So that is going to be published with several more examples just to kind of keep things sort of simple for you. But that is something that you can sort of translate from one to the other, no problem. And let's see what else we've got here. Okay. So bear with me just one moment, please. I'm going to take a look at some of these questions that we've got as well. Okay, so that covers what we're going to do here for the custom gauge and custom chart. Hopefully that will get you through attempting to create your first few gadgets. That will probably get you a foundation to where a lot of the rest of the resources we're going to cover and have available on the doc site will make a lot more sense to you. I highly recommend walking through and trying to make some of these just to get a feel for it. I'll go ahead and publish some queries as well for ConnectWise on-prem, so if that's all you've got to work with, you can test those. And I do want to show you the page on our doc site that's up. So on the doc site, on the home page, you'll see that we've got our upcoming webinars listed here. That webinar is also available on our webinar calendar. And I have added this custom gauges and charts. So this covers some of those links to the downloads that you're going to need from the prerequisites. This gives you some guidance about what we're using today and where you can download it. These are my placeholders where we're going to go ahead and add the webinar recording and the slideshow that we covered. And here in the downloads, these are those custom gauges and charts that have been updated with titles and with a parameter. So for example, the chart here has already been updated to reflect the week. So this is the tickets entered by week, year to date, already updated with that parameter in place, just like we just set up. So you should hopefully be able to get going with that and take that gadget and just kind of cannibalize pieces of it to use with your other queries. And some of those links that we have here, if you're querying ConnectWise directly, they've got tons and tons of info on their reports, their report writers, and their reporting views, the data dictionary as well. And Brad Benner at NextNow has made a very, very handy Excel-based database reference for ConnectWise that you can easily whip up to see what you've got in your database. And if you've got any custom views or anything, this will you can pull that into. And the links to the tools that we use today, like well, actually, we did not use Poor SQL, but let me just show you what I would use something like that for. So, oops, where did I have that open? My text tool. So let's say you want to review one of your gadgets that's already got a query in it, and this is already like this. It's kind of it's really hard to read. The other tool that we recommend using, if you don't have a SQL Management Studio kicking around nearby, this is another easy way to format your SQL queries for readability. So I like to do this when I'm going to go and modify one so that I'm not trying to make sense of this. This makes it a whole lot easier to read. But, so here we go. All right. Wrong page. And so links here to those other tools that we mentioned. And as we come across any others that we like, we'll go ahead and add them here too. And hopefully you guys can take advantage of them. Does anybody have any questions I can cover right now, or is there anything in particular that you had that you were trying to accomplish that we could maybe tackle or address? And I do see that David Patton was asking if the webinar will be available in video form tomorrow. I don't know that it'll be available tomorrow, but definitely by next week. Just there might be some editing they want to do, just to pull out some of like the awkward pauses or to add some additional guidance. But yeah, we'll make sure that's available very soon. I just don't know that it'll definitely be tomorrow. And can I answer any other questions for anybody? Okay. Well, I hope everybody's got enough here to get started with a few custom gadgets of their own. If you have any questions, just keep in mind that custom queries and custom gadgets are not supported by the help desk specifically unless you've identified a bug and it's not returning the correct data. If you're having trouble with your SQL syntax or you need assistance finding the correct data or whatever metric you're trying to capture, our Pro Services team is always here to give you assistance. And of course, the resources that we've shared with you here can also get you a good deal of the way to where you need to be. So I'm going to go ahead and sign off unless I see something else come in. And thanks, everybody, for joining us today. And hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.